Hello and welcome to episode 11 of LogiCast. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of LogiCarta, and I'm joined today by my colleague John. How are you doing today, John?
I'm all right. I'm a bit warmer than last week, but a bit wetter.
Yes, the snow has subsided, the winter wonderland has disappeared, and we're back to the winter floods as we were before. I drove up to the airport this morning, and there was some quite scary aquaplaning on the motorway on the way up there, which in a car as big as mine, if you do lose control, then it's going to be quite big to wrestle that back. But anyway, yes, we're back to the rain. I'm dreaming of a wet Christmas now, yeah. Anyway, thank you for joining LogiCast. This is not the weather forecast. You'd be forgiven for mistaking it for the weather forecast. But LogiCast is a weekly AWS news podcast. Once a week, I curate a list of AWS news, which I share in a weekly email newsletter. And then John and I pick a number of the news articles that we've shared in the news roundup, and we take a bit of a deeper dive. We talk about them, we give a bit of opinion, and usually try and crack a few jokes. And I don't know whether anyone ever laughs, but we think they're funny. So anyway, the first of this week's articles is from the AWS DevOps blog. And it is about configuration-driven dynamic multi-account CI/CD solutions on AWS. So it's very much an instruction article. It's not really about any sort of new features or functionality. It's more just teaching you with the use of examples what you can do with some of the tech that's already there. And John, I know you're big into DevOps and CI/CD. So tell us what excites you about this particular article.
Excite's probably the wrong word. Yeah, I thought we'd start with this one because it's a bit of a break from the relentless, here's a new thing coming out of this time of year's reinvent and announcements and things. So it's a bit of a break from that. In terms of what this is talking about, as you say, it's configuration driven, which is quite cool because most of these kind of cross-account, multi-environment, whatever, CI/CD solutions that you end up seeing, building, using, whatever, are kind of very custom baked. So it's dev looks like this, staging looks like that, and production looks like the other, and there's no kind of central configuration store of this. It's just kind of, it's in your pipeline files and that's kind of it. So there's no really obvious way of doing it, and if you onboard a new environment, prod 2, it's not, it's something I've had to do before in environments where you're kind of doing this weird halfway house. You end up with second prod. There's kind of no easy way of onboarding because you just sort of have to do it all again manually. So this is quite cool because it's using DynamoDB to configure accounts. So you can say dev looks like this and prod looks like that and so on, and you just put it in this table in the central account, and it goes off and makes pipelines for you, which is, again, brilliant, and more of the low code, no code that we like to do and like to see, because writing less code is always better.
So have you ever tried this sample pet store application? I've noticed it's been used in quite a few of these articles, the infamous sample pet store application.
I have used the pet store once or twice, yes, as a, how the hell does this work? Oh, deploy the pet store. Okay, and then we can see how it works. So yes, I have used the pet store. Not for this particular example, because my bag, as it were, to quote Austin Powers, is not doing it within AWS land. I know we're AWS partners and all that jazz, but I've not used code deploy and code pipeline and stuff quite so much as I've used like Jenkins, bath of salt for you, and GitLab and GitHub and a bit of Circle CI and stuff. But yes, pet store, yes, more than once.
So why do you use those solutions rather than the AWS native tools?
Because up until recently, the native tools were awful. Basically, it's up until not that long ago, the native tools were horrible. They just kind of were really, and it's sort of what you expect, right, from a Gen 1, Gen 2 service. They were really bare bones, really simple, really basic. They did what they said, but there was no nice QOL, quality of life features. You couldn't write your pipelines back to code, which was a big thing because listeners or future listeners that have, say, done Jenkins pipelines in the past will know that sitting there and doing all the jobs and clicking around in the GUI is okay for a bit, and then all of a sudden you're managing 400 servers and it's just, oh, crying out loud. And then you have to work out how to do it in pipelines and then write those pipelines back to code because it's just not viable to keep doing it through ClickOps, as it were. They've gotten a lot better. They've gotten a lot better because now I think you can define code pipeline through the CDK, which is quite nice. So it's gotten better. I might use this. Depends on customers and what they want.
But you haven't got a specific use case right now.
I've got one that I can think of, again, for this serverless project that we keep talking about, but subject to, design conversations.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Anything else to say about that one, or should we skip along to the next article?
Nothing massive. It's like I say, this is quite cool because it's configuration driven. So you kind of deploy it once, and then you deploy like a child stack into each account, and then you just update the config table, and it does the rest for you, which is really cool.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's move along to the next article, which is from our friends over at InfoQ. This one is about a recent announcement that was made at reInvent. So, of course, AWS announced this new supply chain tool. The headline of this article is Improved Supply Chain Visibility and Actionable Insights with AWS Supply Chain. So obviously the world's experienced a huge amount of supply chain problems recently. I almost couldn't buy any screen wash in Halfords yesterday. It was nearly all gone. I guess there's some sort of supply chain issue going on there, but sort of above and beyond my screen wash issues. Obviously, we had all the ships queuing outside ports. Was that last year that happened?
What with the Suez Canal blockage?
Yeah, I think that was the start of it. But then I think I think that highlighted further problems, and there was a big knock-on effect from that, with ships kind of queuing up outside all the major harbours around the world, and having a knock-on effect into all of the our day-to-day goods that we're so used to being able to purchase as and when we want. So how are AWS going to help us with all of this?
By stealing all of your data? No, obviously not. I know. They're not actually going to do that. To be completely clear and honest and transparent, we genuinely don't think they're going to do that, because if they, started doing that, then they'd lose customers from all over the joint. But good luck telling that to a retail CEO, because they just won't believe that they won't. So, supply chain. I'm not a supply chain analyst. I know one, but I'm not one. Really boring topic, generally speaking, but then, anything that isn't what you do is boring. What AWS are doing is the old, let's throw some ML at this and see what sticks, I think.
Yeah, okay.
That's all I've got. That's all I've got.
That's all you've got.
So what even is AL? You're more of a supply chain person than I am. I'm just an engineer.
Not really. I'm just a consumer.
Okay.
But it's they're really aiming to it's kind of a vertical use case data lake, I guess, is how I would describe it, because it's throwing all of that supply chain data into one place, so that as you say, you can use some machine learning analytics to derive some actionable insights, and display that in a useful format. So it's all very well having those insights, but if they're not kind of readable by supply chain analysts, then it's not necessarily going to achieve the desired effect. So I can certainly see the use for it. In fact, we have a customer who's into supply chain management, and it is a pretty complicated area. I think that the challenge comes when you're taking data from disparate systems and trying to get the insights, because not every link in the supply chain is going to be using the same system. Some might be on SAP, some might be on another supply chain system, and the data is coming out in different formats and in different frequencies, etc. So to try and drive any sort of useful actionable insights from that must be a bit of a nightmare. As I say, we know that we have one client in particular who specializes in that area. Whether AWS are now coming in to eat some of their dog food, or whether they're addressing a different part of the market will remain to be seen. But obviously AWS being a part of Amazon has an enormous supply chain. I mean, AWS itself will have an enormous supply chain, running hundreds of data centers around the world, and all of the kind of all of the equipment that's required for that. And then of course Amazon itself, the e-commerce giant, the supply chain is absolutely huge. So, they will have some fantastic learnings that they've built up over the years, managing those supply chains. And I guess, having all of that knowledge, issues that they've solved, plus, of course, the great data capabilities that AWS brings, puts them in a pretty strong position, I would say, to be a good player in this market. But it will remain to be seen. But I guess this is AWS moving much more into the sort of business application space rather than the infrastructure space. It's not the application itself, but it's starting to stray into that area, I would say.
I think what this is doing as a meta commentary is it's focusing on sort of the next third, if you like, of AWS's customers, because the first third, for lack of a better kind of differentiation, is it's startups, it's people that are lean, mean, hungry and want to build on AWS. They've got the engineering staff, but they don't have lots of money, so they just kind of go into the cloud and go hard. Then kind of the next third is your established businesses, and that's moving more of what they're doing into an AWS offering. So as you say, it's that started with data center exits, and now it's moving into, again, taking away undifferentiated heavy lifting for these customers.
Yeah, and are you going to go on to the third? Because you only did 2/3, so
the third we don't know what that third looks like yet.
Oh, okay. The unknown third.
The unknown third. No, I was going to say, do we want to talk about price? I was going to say, do we want to talk about pricing? Because this isn't cheap.
Of this. No, it's price per gig of data stored, isn't it? I think.
So there's storage pricing. I don't think there's ingest pricing, which is nice. There's SKU pricing, which for those unfamiliar, SKU is a stock keeping unit. Anyone that's worked in a retail job will actually know that, which is probably half the world. And then there's more SKU-based pricing, depending on whether you're doing insights or demand planning. There is a free trial, so you get 1,000 SKU combinations for insights and demand, and 10 gig storage for free for the first 60 days. So it's not like free forever, but you can kind of play around with it for nothing. But it can get quite expensive quite quickly. Like their examples, they do, to their credit, use realistic examples in pretty much all their pricing examples. But their first example has a 10 grand a month bill. So this is not cheap, and this is not for your little mom and pop distribution company, if you like. This is not for your Uber driver that's moonlighting delivering Amazon packages. This is for big corporates. So this is aimed at.
Yeah. Who will be spending millions a year on SAP licenses, no doubt, or Oracle licenses, or we shouldn't mention the O word on an AWS focused podcast, should we? But there we go. Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is big boy stuff, and has the price tag to go with that. So yeah, this is definitely aimed squarely into the enterprise space. So but yeah, interested to see how Amazon can help with that. I would imagine that many of their customers are already hosting all of these supply chain management systems on AWS. So it's quite a logical extension if the data is already there to help AWS do some analysis on that.
Yeah, again, it's taking the undifferentiated heavy lifting away. Just give us all of your data, please, because we'll deal with it. But here's a bill.
Well done on finding the mute button there, John, as well.
I wasn't even talking about audio quality.
But bizarrely, since you had your muted sneeze, all the background noise has gone from my headphones. So when
the rain has eased up a bit.
The rain stopped? That's what it is. The rain has stopped as well. You sneezed so hard, you've blown the clouds away.
Does that make me an X-Man?
Something on there. I mean, you are wearing a Super Cloud t-shirt, so perhaps you're experiencing the Super Cloud powers with your cloud dispersing sneezes.
It's funny you say that. I have some proper superstitions about these shirts. Every exam that I've taken for AWS, I've worn something of this nature, and I've passed. First time on all of them. Proper superstitious.
And you are not the only one. You have met her, Zarina Barnsby. We met at the Brighton Cloud meetup. She did once win the exact same t-shirt that you're wearing, and she wore it to take her Solutions Architect Associate exam, and she passed. So I think there is something in that superstition, John. So if there's any listeners who are about to take any AWS certifications and would like to win a Super Cloud T-shirt as a lucky charm, then all you got to do is enter my free prize draw every Friday on the website. So check my LinkedIn profile. You'll see my videos every Friday with a link to the free prize draw, and we could help you get your next AWS certification. Anyway, moving swiftly on from those superstitions.
From plugging the marketing.
Yeah, moving swiftly on to another AWS blog post. This one is about the well-architected framework and how to use the well-architected framework with AWS Trusted Advisor to achieve data-driven cost optimization. So cost optimization, always a hot topic, and particularly right now in these difficult times where people potentially are looking for ways to cut costs and increase their profit margins. This is always a welcome discussion. In fact, we're having a number of conversations right now with customers and prospective customers about how they can optimize their AWS costs. And of course, there's lots of different approaches to do that. This is one of them. So it's talking about following the well-architected framework, but also using some of the tools that AWS provide to help in the driving those optimizations. So what's your thoughts on this one, John?
I'm thinking, given that you're certified professional for solution architect, you should tell us what the well-architected framework is.
Well, it's that thing, isn't it? Yeah, you know.
Can you name all? What is it? 6 pillars.
There are 6 pillars. There's the newest one is the sustainability pillar. In fact, I think there might be more than 6 pillars now because
of sustainability.
I think there was another one as well. I think there's another one in addition to sustainability, but don't quote me on that. I might have to go and Google that while you do some talking. But the well-architected framework is just it's essentially a guide that AWS solutions architect professionals such as myself can guide customers through to make sure that their environments are well architected against a number of different what AWS call pillars, or effectively lenses that you can look at your architecture through. So sustainability, as we mentioned, we think is the newest one, but also there's cost optimization, there's reliability, there's security, and off the top of my head I can't remember all 6 or 7
architectural excellence.
Okay, so I think we got 5. That's not bad. What's the pass mark in the exam? 75%, 750 out of 1,000. So we probably need one more. But I can tell you that I did not get asked any questions about the well-architected framework in my solutions architect professional exam. Anyway, so this is really talking about the well-architected framework really just guides you through a series of questions with customers. So it's a structured consulting process, essentially. But some of those questions are going to need data in order to be able to effectively respond to them. And that's really what this article is talking about. If you go and ask a customer, and the specific example used in this article, because yes, I did actually read it, was about RAM allocation for Lambda functions. If you ask a customer, are you optimizing the RAM allocation for your Lambda functions? If they don't have any data about that, they're not going to be able to answer those questions. So what it's talking about is ways that you can get that data. So what are some of the ways that we could get that data, John?
So this is always a fun one because I've done this quite a bit. As we know, I'm not officially a serverless hero. Maybe I should sign up, see if I can get that. Another good thing for the firm to have. I'm kind of the serverless guy around here. I've done the most with it. I'm not going to toot my own horn too much. There's a number of ways you can do this. So what they're talking about here is using Trusted Advisor, which is an AWS tool that evaluates stuff, your account, against the well-architected framework, and just kind of gives you recommendations. It does it for basically all of your account, but in this instance, it's talking about using it for Lambdas, right? Because if you may or may not know, I mean, you do, but listeners may or may not know that it's not just memory that you're allocating with Lambda memory allocation. It's also percentage of virtual CPU, because it's just kind of one dial for both of them. The more RAM you have, the more CPU you have, the faster everything kind of runs. Yeah, it's one dial rather than being kind of too specific. So what the particular example is saying is, you optimize your Lambda and you put it on this particular memory allocation and you reduce cost by an amount. So that's one way of doing it, and it will just kind of give you a recommended size, which is great, it's brilliant, but it needs data. As you say, it needs data. It needs to sit there and it needs to run, it needs to observe your account, so you need to have configured it somehow for it to do that, and then it will kind of run off and do it. Another tool that I quite like to use is called the Lambda Power Tuner, which is just great. I will dig out a link and put it in the show notes. But what it is it's a step function that you deploy your Lambda using your configuration, and then you configure this step function, and what it does is it runs your Lambda with various configurations, and then it spits out a URL to a nice pretty graph which shows you kind of executions, memory, time, cost, and all that sort of thing. And then looking at that graph, there's usually a very quick and easy way of going, oh, it's that number there, so you can kind of skip all of this process and just get it from 100 executions in about 5 minutes. That's great, and that works, and that's lovely, except where you're talking out to like external APIs and stuff, and you get limited, and then you kind of have to fall back on this sort of thing. But generally this is good, this is quite useful, and something that is not an original John thought, but is very true. I think, again, Corey Quinn said this: you're in the cloud, your architecture is your cost strategy. They are the same thing. You could be more resilient and pay more, you can be less resilient and pay less. Usually the correct answer is kind of somewhere in the middle, unless you are absolutely 100%. We will be best practice, which most people aren't, in my experience. So yeah, your cost strategy and your architectural strategy are the same thing, just people don't seem to realise that yet. And this is kind of helping in that regard, which is always good, albeit a little bit under the covers.
So I did look up the well-architected framework. It is 6 pillars. I was confusing in my mind. There were 2 new leadership principles when we were looking at those the other week, and it was 1 new pillar in the well-architected framework, which is sustainability. The other 5, of course, being operational excellence, security, reliability, performance, and cost optimization. So I think we got most of those. So I think we got enough of them to achieve a pass in this.
It's not going to come up in mine because I'm going to do the DevOps Pro instead, and it's not going to be in that.
I don't think it was in the solutions architect professional either. But
which is terrible, because you need to pass that exam to do a well-architected review against the framework.
Yeah, I assume there's some further training on that that needs to be taken. But yeah, that's certainly one of the boxes you've got to tick to be able to conduct a well-architected review.
Maybe we could start offering it as a service.
We need to.
Ah, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to do that exam.
So yeah, moving on then to the next article. We've got another AWS blog post, an article about troubleshooting network connectivity to Amazon RDS databases using VPC Reachability Analyzer. So I've never heard of this VPC Reachability Analyzer. Have you used it, John?
No, but I know what it is, so I'm familiar. I picked this less to talk about the RDS point, because it's kind of like whatever, it's a target, and more to talk about the VPC Reachability Analyzer. Try saying that.
That's easy for you to say. Easy for you to say.
Apparently not. So I've had this before as well. You configure a new account, you configure a new environment, you configure a new VPC, you put your servers in your public and your private networks and all that jazz, and then you can't hit a box. What's gone on? So then you start going through your security groups, and that's kind of all looks okay. And then you look at your NACLs, and they kind of all look okay. And then you look at your routing and your flow logs, and it just kind of, you just go down a rabbit hole with this stuff, because networking is hard. Networking in the cloud is harder, because there's no cables to go and find. It's all just kind of on your screen. It's hard to the extent that there's a specialty exam in networking. It's that hard, which I may or may not do at some point.
It is the sort of thing that would come up in a SA Pro exam or in an SA Associate exam, actually, that you can't connect. What could the problem be?
What could the problem be, or what tools would you use to diagnose the problem?
Well, I'd never seen Reachability Analyzer as a potential answer, hence me not knowing there was a tool that you could use. But,
it's newish. It's only a few months old, so it's probably
maybe
not filtered into the pack of questions yet.
Yeah, it might be in the next version of the exam.
Well, maybe, but they do refresh the questions every so often. But because they pick your 60 questions or 65 questions from a pool of a couple of thousand, so it takes a while for questions to kind of get updated. But yeah, VPC Reachability Analyzer. It kind of takes all of that manual process of tracing through and doing trace routes and pinging things and turning on Wireshark and all that you'd have to do in the old world, and does it kind of all for you for the low price, sound like a sales guy now, of 10 cents a run. So it's not free. It does cost you money, but, you know, $1 for 10 runs, just run it. Like, whatever. Unless it's in a customer account, and then you kind of have to ask permission to charge the money. But if it's your own account, just run it. Seriously, just run it. It's fine. It will cost you longer. It will cost the business more in your salary than it will cost in you just running it, unless you're exceptionally underpaid. But yeah, what it's doing is you give it a start and an end and say, make route, please. And you sort of say, it's going to go through here and go through there. And then it will kind of go, I get stuck here on your network interface. I get stuck there on your NACL settings, on your whatever. And it just kind of takes all of that away and makes that all really lovely and easy. And, you know, everyone gets to go to the pub early.
Nice. We always like anything that can get us to the pub earlier.
To loop back to the RDS specific part of this, they're just using RDS as an example. They are also saying, of course, that with the VPC Reachability Analyzer, I think you do need to supply it with an IP address. So they're showing you kind of how to do that from the command line. You use NSLOOKUP, basically.
Yeah, so obviously it's not only for RDS, it's for anything that
anything that you put in
any
VPC.
VPC networks. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Well, we like to see new tools that can make our lives easier. So I think the rain has started again, John. I can hear it in the background there.
Wooden roof.
Yeah. So let's move on to our final article from this week then. Our friends at the Register again. This one, always a hot topic. Leaky S3 buckets. Let's hope you're not going to have a leaky shed roof today, but leaky S3 buckets. If you do have a leaky shed roof, let's hope you're not going to catch the leak with a leaky bucket as well. But
oh, the shed's only like 18 months old. I should hope it doesn't leak.
Yeah, but you built it yourself, didn't you?
Oh, I paid some people to build the structure, and then I kind of did all the internals and the wiring and the electrics, and you know.
Let's hope you're going to stay dry then.
Yeah.
So this article is about effectively a new way that AWS have introduced to prevent you from creating leaky buckets, because it's always been very popular. I've shared myself on many an occasion the latest data breach article, which is down to someone making an S3 bucket public that shouldn't have been, and AWS have always gone to great lengths to stress that S3 buckets are not public by default. So the only way they can become public is if you or a member of your team makes them public. But it's actually been quite easy to do that and overlook it, which is why there have been so many data breaches. So lots of changes have been made over the years to try and make it just that little bit harder for you to make that configuration error. But what can you tell us about the latest one, John?
So, yeah, sorry, hang on. Bad timing. So, yes, we've said this a couple of times, every time kind of leaky buckets come up, right? AWS have a bad rap for S3 being insecure. It's not, by default, it's not, but it's very easy to misconfigure. So they've done a number of things over the years. Back in 2018, they added some security controls so that it would be private by default. And then 2021, they've added a few new features to it, and bucket policies, NIAM, and all that jazz. And now what they're doing is they are adding what they're calling a public access block, which is kind of, I think it's part of the bucket policy or a new security setting that prevents you from enabling public access. So as it stands at the minute, you have to go in and say, yes, this can all be public, and then you make the objects public. With this in place, you'll have to enable those controls first. So you delete the thing that's saying that you can't even try to make it public, and then you can make it public, and then you can make it object public. So it's just kind of another layer. It's another way of stopping you from mucking it up, because it is so easy to do, but now it's significantly less easy to do.
Well, that's great. So let's hope that we're not going to be seeing as many of those headlines. And I think our friends at the Register have been guilty of sharing many of them. In fact, there's a number of links in the article to data breach stories that they have published on the Register. So let's hope this new feature is going to see fewer and fewer of those going forwards. Anything we can do to help keep
Whilst we might like to laugh at them, because it's always good to have a giggle, especially when it's like these big government corporations and all that sort of thing that really should know better, we don't like seeing leaky buckets. It's not something we like to see because it's people's personal data being exposed at the end of the day.
Absolutely. The main reason we like to point it out is just to make our customers aware that it is such an easy thing to do, and therefore it's something that they should be very conscious of, and certain that they're not making that same mistake themselves, because nobody wants to be that next data breach headline. Excuse me, bad timing from my perspective there this time. So that brings us neatly to the end of our time today. Thanks a lot for your input there, John. And that wraps up episode 11 of LogiCast, and that also wraps up LogiCast for 2022. So we're heading into the holiday period at the end of this week. So we will be back in 2023 with episode, we don't know what we're going to call it yet. It might be season 2.
I think series 2.
Watch this space.
Seriously, season 2?
Yeah. So whether it's episode 12 of season 2 or is it episode 1 of season 2, that's something we're going to have to discuss and decide upon. But we will be back one way or another with an episode which will have a number at the beginning of 2023. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next time. Have a great holiday period if you're listening to this before the holiday period.